Good afternoon, welcome to the launch event for the story of the Commodore 64 in pixels. I'm Andrew Fisher, I was one of the writers involved in the book. I'm also a Commodore 64 fan, having owned one for over 30 years. Introducing the panel, all of them have a strong connection with the 64 or took part in the book. Sitting to my right is Ben Daglish. Ben was friends with Tony Crowther and started off with the Death March in Percy the Potty Pigeon. His music graced many games, including Trap, Kettle, The Last Ninja and Crackout. Ben is now well known as a member of supergroups Stuck in the 80s and as compere of live music events. Next we have Archer Maclean. Archer's 3 64 games are all well remembered. International Karate, Drop Zone and IK+. And next we have Roger Kean and Ollie Frey. Roger and Ollie were founders of Newsfield magazines. First came Crash and then the almighty Zap 64. Roger was editor for the first year, and Ollie drew many memorable cover pages, as well as the margin characters. Ollie was also responsible for the artwork on Falamus games. And then we have Darrell Etherington, another programmer. Darrell produced several great arcade clones for Anirog, including Cybertron. His best known game is probably the official conversion of Sega's Super Hang-On. So then, question one. Why do you think the C64 was so popular for so long?
Well, from my point of view, the SID chip. The SID chip was I mean, yes, I would say that, being a SID musician. But the SID chip was just way ahead of all the other chips, of all the other sound chips. Everything else was kind of had like the AY8912 or beepers and things. The C64 was the only thing that had a proper synthesizer built inside, you know. Proper 3-voice synthesizer with enveloping and waveforms and filters and you know, it was, yes. And certainly the number of people that told me that they bought the games just for the music, which I didn't think happened on any other platform, you know. It was, like I said, yes, it was I often say it was the first sequencer that I ever owned, and the first synthesizer I ever owned. It was a proper synthesizer, as opposed to just a sort of a beepy chip that made music, you know. So yeah, from my point of view, it was that. Don't care about the rest of it.
Yeah. Archer?
Well, I could write a book about it, but he's done one.
Yeah, but he's done a lot. He's kind of a traitor. He'll write a book about anything.
Yeah, with his millions.
Yeah, right. Yeah, indeed.
No, one of the first things I remember about both the Atari and the 64 was you turned them on, and it said ready. You had a flashing cursor, and you could do stuff with it and program it. And I think one of the reasons it hung around so long is because remember the days when kids at school could, you know, get a BBC or a 64 or whatever and actually do something really quick. If you try doing anything like that now on a PC, you got a massive learning curve. You know, just jump off the cliff before you start. It's just horrible. So that's one big reason, I think.
Roger, from the magazine point of view?
Yeah, it's from an editorial point of view. Well, coming from working for a year or so with the ZX Spectrum, yeah, as Ben says, the sound was stunning when I first heard the 64 playing tunes, and we certainly noticed that with the Falamus games when they started. Music was just great. But for me, actually, graphics were, of course, a bit of an eye-opener after the Spectrum.
Just a bit.
And I don't know, there was just so much enthusiasm for the people who used the computer, who played the games. And that enthusiasm lasted a long, long while. I think it had a greater longevity than almost any other machine that's claimed to play games.
Darrell, your views?
For me, it was one of the Spectrum and the other stuff you said, the Z80 and all the other stuff coming out. It was the first one that felt like a real computer. And it was a really good quality machine, and yeah, the proper keyboard and everything. It just felt like a really, really nice machine. And doing a lot of work on the VIC-20 as well, where you just literally had 3.5K to work in, and all of a sudden you've got this, the SID chip, you've got the extra graphics, and you've got 64K. It just opened up a whole new world of stuff you could do on it, and even by today's standards, 64K was quite small, but you know, I think all of us generally spend absolutely hours cramming as much as possible into that 64K. So it was, I think it was just sort of like the step to a real computer. There was lots of others around, and they were good, but this one was the first one that really was going to stay there for a long time. nice piece of kit.
Thank you. You read online a lot of criticism about the Commodore 64's graphics, the blocky pixels and the palette full of greys. But what do you think made the VIC chip special? I'll start with Archer.
The VIC chip,
The graphics chip.
that chip. Oh,
Do you remember?
yeah. Is that the one with the DMA going? What do I think was special about it? Well, I'm always a big fan of the Atari, so I've got to avoid not talking about that. But what was good about it? I think that the most obvious thing for me straight off was the sprites. They were big and large and fat and had loads of colours in them, and considerably bigger than the Ataris. Hardware collision detection was a plus point because that saved a huge amount of processing time. It boasted hardware scrolling, but it didn't really have that hardware scrolling. It had plus or minus 3 pixels, which is not hardware scrolling. Whereas, of course, the Atari does like half a K. What else was good about it? Yeah, it was reasonably fast. It had a 6502, which had been an established processor for about 10 years when it came out. So, yeah, I really liked it.
And Darrell, what did you think of the graphics?
The step up in the resolution made it good, and again the sprites, as Archer said. And I think there's also some other things around the machine where I remember a lot of us played around, and there was it had been out for a little while. And then you found that you could get some sprites into the border by doing some clever stuff, programming, and all of a sudden you had a batch of games coming out that didn't have a border around them, and all sorts of clever stuff. So it opened up all sorts of possibilities, and it was just the next step up of quality, I think.
I think vertical syncs and having the scanline interrupts was another massive plus
right at the top, so all of a sudden, I remember releasing one of the first games and there was no border top and bottom, and although you were limited to what you could do, it was like hours of like tweaking just to get that to look right. So you would just be one of those special ones that was a bit different. Everything else had a border, and you had this new stuff that you could work on. It was good fun machine.
And did you make your own graphics or work with a graphic artist?
Most of mine I did myself. There was a few, one of the guys back in the annual days, some of the early stuff, the guy worked there that did some of the graphics for us, but most of them tended to do myself.
You've got to remember this is like mid-80s, early 80s, and things like tools weren't even defined, I mean, but you wrote your own graphics editor in BASIC with a joystick.
I remember writing font editors and
Exactly.
so that, just to make life easy, because otherwise it was literally coding it straight in line by line.
Well, but I'm sure we all filled out bits of graph paper.
Yeah.
We made some ones. A spaceship or something, and then animated it on graph paper.
Yeah.
And then you had to turn it into hex and then import it somewhere. Oh, that's a nightmare. What are we doing?
Ben's already mentioned the SID chip and how important it was. What was it like to work with Ben?
Strawberry.
Well, it was. You see, one of the things I was going to say was that actually, the only, I mean, it was a kind of the charm, I suppose, as well of both of the VIC chip and the SID was actually they were slightly cheap and they used slightly cheap components, and so and the things like the sprites in the board and stuff like that. Basically, it was actually this was just like little tricks you could play to fuck up the chip, right? Because of the fact it wasn't really top quality components. I mean, the classic thing with the SID was the filters. So the SID had like high and low bandpass filtering on, but they just used really cheap components for the filters. So you couldn't rely on the filters. You couldn't just set a filter to say, I just want it to do these frequencies and nothing else, because it would sound great on your machine, but on the next machine, you wouldn't be able to hear it at all because it would have filtered out absolutely everything.
Yes, the Commodore manual actually had said there's a variation of up to 20% in the filter.
Indeed, well, that was a low estimate, yeah. But what it did mean was that instead, what everybody did, because what you could guarantee was that if you did a filter sweep, if you just started at the one end and you'd wow all the way to the other end, that was going to work. Because somewhere in the middle there, everybody was going to be able to hear the effect, And so that became actually one of the classic chip tune sounds, as it were.
SID sound.
It was the sound of like these sweeping filters, And we probably wouldn't have done that were it not for the fact that the filters were so cruddy. And again, things like tricks like sprites in the border probably wouldn't have been discovered were it not for the fact that people were trying to get over the limitations and things. In fact, a guy just this week, wasn't it? Just kind of, he solved the 30-year-old bug about the hardware
VSP.
scroll. Yes.
Yeah, about the VSP variable scroll position.
Indeed, absolutely.
Which
Yes.
works on some machines and not on others.
And not on others' machines. And only 30 years later did he definitively go, that's because of all these zero address memory, wasn't it? All these sort of, sorry to get all geeky on you, but wait a minute, what am I talking about? Sorry to get all geeky.
This is
on
the
a
right
room
audience.
full of geeks.
This is the right
in the
audience.
geekiest bloody room that I've ever been in my life. But anyway, right, so yes. So this is all to do with, wasn't it, addresses that, it was all the ones that ended in 0, and sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. So I think that the whole, the charm, actually, that they put together a really nice machine, but it just skimped just a little bit, but it actually it meant every machine was very slightly individual. And so to get over these individualities, you played lots of little tricks. And those little tricks became part of the culture and part of the sort of the definitive sound and the definitive look and feel of the machine,
And was there a lot of sharing of knowledge? So when someone found something like that, did they share it with others?
Well, it's pre-internet.
Exactly. I mean, we had
I've just had a letter.
Yes, handwritten.
Yeah. It did, yes. I mean, there was like,
we go down the pub.
but I mean, no, there was a lot of sharing. I mean, I always say I've never paid for a game in my life.
You owe me £1.
Well, no, wait a minute. I spot you for a copy of but there was actually, because it was quite a. I don't know what there was the sort of the top geek competitive thing sort of going on.
There was sort of friendly competition.
Yeah.
I remember John Eyre ringing me up about 3 in the morning one night. 3 in the morning, because he used to work at night. I did as well.
Yeah.
And he was saying he's discovered some trick with a sprite or something at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
I thought he was winding me up or in prison or something. It was his only call, But no, that went on for 3 or 4 hours. Then the sun came up. It was
Barry Leach used to ring up Rob Hubbard when he was about 14 and just to tell him he was rubbish. Can you imagine? But anyway, But no, so there was a when you discovered how to do something, you'd tell people, you'd tell them you did it, and then after a couple of days you'd tell them how you did it. Yeah.
Did you have much unfinished or unpublished work for the 64, and is there anything left of it now? Any unfinished games?
Well, I did Drop Zone 2.
So, tell us about Drop Zone 2.
It did exist actually. It looks like Drop Zone 1, except instead of flying sideways, you go down into caverns and underneath planets and stuff. So that did exist, and you would sort of set a time bomb down the bottom of the cave somewhere and then get out before the whole planet blew up. So that does exist, but it's not finished enough to sell. Unlike the Oliver Brothers had that bizarre game. What was that game? That they found in their loft and claimed it was a finished game ready to go or something. It's not as good as that, but it did exist.
Darrell, did you have much left over?
Well, a few bits and pieces that were sort of creations that didn't really evolve, so they were hanging around for a while, and every now and then you went back to them and you moulded it into something else, but didn't publish them. So there was a few, but nothing spectacular. I think they were more sort of like test beds, so you would use it to develop something and come up with something, like the sprites in the border. You start off doing something, then you actually get a contract or another game that you were writing, and you use that as a bit of a platform for playing around while you put the ideas into a game that was definitely going to go to market. So I guess there was quite a few of those just trial and error bits lying around that you can actually mould into anything.
And quite a few of your games were obviously inspired, drawing heavily on the arcade games at the time. Did you see the arcade game and think, I want to play that? And
I think when I first started, my very first game, I think we launched to Anurog, but I only worked for them for a period of time, and then I had an agent in London, the same agent Archer, worked for as well. And Anurog started off by doing lots of clones of arcade games. So the guys there, Jeff Gammon was another guy there, and they did things like Donkey Kong and Scramble, all those sorts of games that were really, really popular at the time. And you did spend time playing them. I remember the Robotron Classic was just found outside after God knows how many years, which is fantastic. I dread to think how much I spent in a local kebab shop. I think I kept them in business for about 10 years, learning every level meticulously, and we even got to the point where myself and a friend, Andrew Glaster, got friendly with the guy that kept putting the damn levels up to try and make some money because we were so good at it. And he used to you could freeze the screen in the diagnostics mode, so we used to get him to freeze the screen and just drop some just down so you could get it as accurate as possible when you got home. So, poor guy never made any money out of us on a Saturday at all because we were in there all day for about 10p after years of practice. So I don't think we were his most popular people, but yeah, you had to play them a lot, but then you tried to put a little bit of an original spin on it as well. So whether it was the graphics or adding a level that wasn't in the original one, there was always some nice bits and pieces you could do, even if you were trying to copy it, which I think made it a little bit unique.
So Archer, what really inspired your games?
Well, believe it or not, the first game I ever wrote was in 1977. When I was about this big. What made me do it? It was on a NASCOM 1.
Wow.
I built a NASCOM 1 when I was at school. And it took a long time to get it working, but I got it working. And then I thought I could make some more of these, so I made about 10 and sold them to all the teachers. So not for bribes for getting good exam results, because I was crap at that. Anyway, what it was is I went down to an arcade in Tottenham Court Road. I skived off school, went down Tottenham Court Road with my best mate Adrian, and we found an arcade, and it had Sprint, black and white driving game. Anyone remember Sprint? Yeah. Well, that was in there, and that was cutting edge then. You look at it now, you're like, oh, bloody hell. But the best bit was, we were there in our school uniforms, because we were skiving off, and old school uniform trousers had turn-ups in the bottom of the trousers. And what I discovered by accident was if I put my 10 pence in, I had a game, but the 10p was falling out of the door because it wasn't quite shut and into my turn-up. So as soon as the game was over, I'd pull it out, put it back in, and I went round and round and round for 4 or 5 hours doing this. And eventually I went home dreaming of black and white driving games, and I wrote one on this NASCOM 1. Just to sort of mimic what it looked like, which would actually turn out to be quite simple. So, yeah, wasn't much to it. Probably 2k of code. End of the days.
Now, obviously, an important part of the industry was the games magazines, reviewing and previewing new games. And Roger, what was your relationship like with the programmers and the companies?
It was pretty good on the whole, I like to think, anyway. It actually began really with Crash. We did establish quite a few good relationships with software publishers, and that rolled over into the Commodore market very well. Probably as much as anything because the enthusiasm of Julian Rignall and Gary Penn, and the fact that
And Gary Liddon.
and just a little bit later Gary Liddon, and they were in their own 3 ways completely crazy. But it really worked, and I even found pictures that I'd forgotten about those two initially with Tim Chaney and Jeff Brand at the Hendon Museum when they were launching. And that was a kind of relationship. What it did mean, of course, is we got to see quite a lot of games in development. I know, for instance, Houston, both with Andrew and Braybrook and Steve Turner and Raph. They sort of did these diaries as they were developing. The one I remember was mostly involved in was Paradroid.
I did.
And that was really good to have a kind of 3 or even 4 months insight into a game actually being created and torn apart and put back together again. Because Andrew was often in despair, and he'd come to Ludlow, and then the next time he'd come up next week, going, yeah, we've done it, we've cracked it. I suppose that, in a sense, could be said to have put undue pressure on magazines for good review, but it didn't always work. It didn't always work. That's why Jeff Brand. Well, Jeff Brand never came to Ludlow. He just sent
money.
No.
That's wishful thinking.
No, he certainly didn't do that.
Never sent money to anyone.
They screwed us on the advertising rates unmercifully. No, he always sent Woody. Woody was the secret missile.
She's still around.
Darrell, from the other side, was a good review important to you?
Yeah, I think it was actually. I remember you went with basic rest of the magazine to come out. If you knew there was going to be a review in there, and it was you were keen to get the first look at it and see how it come out, and thankfully you get a good review. It was a real bit of a buzz as well. Especially you spent 3 months developing this stuff and getting it to market and everything else. It was quite an important part of it as well. And I think also back in those days as well. It was because the number of people doing it was limited. It was a great thing with your mates as well. Because you've got the magazine, it's like, oh, look, I've written this, and it's like wow, and it was a bit of a wow factor to actually get something actually in a magazine. So yeah, I think it was really important to actually see that, and when you had the pictures and all the other stuff in there as well, it was definitely good. It was something I think we were all proud of when it came out, to actually see your stuff up there in a magazine.
You had the Zach Gold Medal Award and those sort of things.
Yeah, it was.
There was always an enormous amount of argument about the Sizzler, Zach Sizzler, especially the gold medal. So it's basically only ever won a month, or not even always if it was worth it. And that, in my stint on Zap, with the two Garys and Julian, my job is sort of umpiring and trying to get some kind of consensus. But you have Gary Penn going, Julian Wiggle saying, why, it's real, and Gary Liddon, his favourite one, which he was too well from, was the
That's it,
You'd get a month where you had more than one magazine where you had a review, and the reviews were quite different, and then clearly some payment did go on, and not to both companies, but it was it's good if you could get the reviews similar across all the different magazines. So it was definitely something good.
I discovered something about Julian Rignall the other day that I didn't know until recently, and that was he got
It
the
was
job.
a wig.
It was a wig. Yeah. He shaved it off. No, to get the job as a games reviewer, he had won some British championship.
Yes, he
at
did,
Marquette.
yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, he did.
So that's why he's so ninja good.
Which
at everything.
VNU put the money up for, which is why Chris Anderson
Right,
knew it.
okay.
Actually, Gary went in for the same competition and came something like, I don't know, third or fourth. But the thing about Gary is he could actually write.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
No, that's unfair. Julie became a very fine writer too. But
and
Yeah, he's over there.
did you get much other feedback from the public other than reviews? I mean, Archer, did you find out from the people who were playing games what they thought of it?
Yeah, when I did the snooker game, that's 1991 or so. Virgin got a lot of mail. Some saying they found a bug, some saying could I have a signature, that sort of thing. But the funniest one I remember was someone wrote in saying they had a virus. This is 1991, and what it was if anyone remembers that game, if you didn't touch it for about 2 minutes, 2 pixel flies would sort of walk around the screen. And I put that in because I used to program at night, and during the summer these real flies would turn up and walk around the screen. So I just mimicked that. And this guy wrote in saying he wanted his money back, the machine was wrong, there was this virus on it, everything was going to be wiped out. And there was no end of management discussion about that as to whether it was a virus. And I'm saying, no, it's a bit of code. I can turn it on and off. Look, 10 flies, 5 flies, control.
Before, I suppose, Easter egg had been a popular, a popular phrase.
Well, I was always trying to put Easter eggs in, but
but
they
weren't
didn't
called
get
Easter
it.
eggs, weren't they?
No, a label hadn't been given to it.
Indeed.
Yeah. So yes, there was some interesting mail about that.
And what would you say were your worst moments working with the 64?
Me.
Yeah, we start.
Yeah, I kept on blowing it up. You were talking about SIDship earlier. I had a development system that had a physical parallel port connection at the back.
Right.
And if that wasn't quite in right, it would short 2 pins out. And the 6510, I think it was, the I/O chip would melt. But the first you knew about it was a funny smell and a little bit of smoke coming out the back. And that quite often took out the SID chip as well. So I eventually ended up buying a tube of the 6510 chips, or whatever the chip was. And regular as clockwork, middle of the night, I was taking the back off, putting the chip in, to the point where I took the case off and just left the case off so I could replace the chip. And I ended up burning out the edge connector on the back of the 64. So talk to Andy Glacier about it. A bit late perhaps, but yeah.
I may have done some of those inspectors, so I might blind them.
I'll work with you later.
Darrell, what were your worst moments?
I think the worst one for me was that the 64 was fantastic, but every peripheral that came out for it was a lot of rubbish. The brick for the hard drive, the cassette player, you had this great machine, and just a shame that back in the day and age they seemed really reliable. And me and Archer were chatting just beforehand. It's like when you're really eager, you've got that new game, and you've been sitting there and it's been loading for 5 minutes, and then it's back tape error, and you've got to go back to the store, get another tape. And it's just really frustrating that some of that stuff, I think, let down a really good machine. And the hard drive was pretty appalling. I remember everyone used to have them on their side because you used to get to a point where you get read errors, but if you actually put the thing on its side, with the power connector at the top, it always miraculously fixed it, and it worked.
I facilitated it and just pulled it slightly.
Yeah.
It would work.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
like
you
that
can
now.
hold the top of the cassette deck. When you put the cassette in, you put your finger on it and like held the case tight shut. Sometimes it would load, and then you take your finger off and it doesn't, and it's like, it's weird. But the machine itself was fantastic. I mean, it was.
There's the famous Jeff Minter quote about the 1541 that it's faster to put the disc on top of the computer and let the data travel by osmosis.
Ben, did you have any difficult moments, long hours, that sort of thing?
Well, long hours, yeah, but that was just work. No, not difficult. No, as I said, yes, as you say, it was just the peripherals, just the disc drive was the slowest thing ever. But not with the 64 was a solid machine, you know. A keyboard was a solid keyboard. You could hit it and it just kind of took it all. No, it was yeah, I mean, well, you look at the number that still survive now, you know. No, it was a great box. Didn't have any problems with it at all. Sorry to completely mess up your question. Yeah. What problems did you have with the Commodore 64? None. Next.
Yes, that was actually Commodore themselves who revised the chip. The original designer had left, and they actually followed his specifications to the letter. And the end result was they reduced the voltage on the chip.
Yeah.
So it's actually the excess voltage is what gives the volume to the samples on the original chip. So when you then try and play the same sample on the newer chip, it doesn't have. There is a way of fixing it in hardware with a resistor, and there's a lot of games that have what we call a digiboost, which is just an extra bit of code to give you back that volume. But it was actually then it was a hardware issue with when the C64C. The whole point of it was to reduce the cost of manufacturing the machine even further, so they would get more profit off the back of it. And in doing that, they changed that. There are some other minor differences in the machine as well. There's some differences in the colours and one or two other small routines. There's even another one where if you clear the screen without setting the colour first, the wrong colours are left in the colour memory. Yes, so going back, what would you say was your best achievement on the Commodore 64, Ben?
Well, I was talking to somebody this weekend about this, or talking to a few people, but I can't think of an earlier instance of the demo other than the trap demo. So I think mine and Tony Crowther's greatest achievement was inventing the demo. The trap thing, which was basically, it was the like a little, for anybody that doesn't know, it's a little movie that we had at the end of a game, just as a reward for finishing the game. You know, we finished the game and then we played through this kind of 7-minute piece of music with this kind of little animated drummer and this spaceship, and well, it's like a little film. And it's the first instance that I can think of just having some music and graphics, animated graphics together without anything else going on. So without any game behind it, as it were. It was just, and so yes, I think we invented the demo. So that would be probably my proudest moment. Or yes,
what was
yes.
that game you did with a train track, train driving around it, by the way?
What, Loco was it?
Loco.
Or
well, I remember going to see him in Sheffield when he was doing it, and he told me.
Black Thunder as well. Black Thunder was a hard one. Loco was kind of reasonable, and then he did Black Thunder afterwards.
He was really getting into doing a demo, and he did the game. The game was 4K of code.
Yeah.
And then he showed me the demo, and it was 17K of code.
Yeah.
He put more effort into the demo.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
No, Tony liked showing off.
Oh, he did.
Definitely. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, I think it probably took us longer to write the trap demo than it took him to write the game. You know, just because we spent loads of, from the sort of an artistic point of view, darling. You know, we're sort of syncing it all up with the music and stuff. You know. But yeah, so I said that I think is if we're going to go down in history for anything, it'll be for that.
Archer, your best achievement?
That's an interesting one. Well, I can tell one thing, but just to follow up what you just said, I did manage to break a Commodore in another method one day. A can of Coke exploded as I was drinking. I was trying to get the tab off with my teeth, of all things, and it blew up and went into the keyboard and into the hard drive, the 1541, and the keyboard was jammed solid, and I couldn't clean it, so end of that machine. But I remember thinking I can salvage the 1541, so I sent it down to Commodore UK under warranty. And they sent it back with a note saying, why has it got lots of fermented sugar in the bottom of it?
Ants!
Yeah, they were living in there. That's what it was. I don't know whether I've got a particular most famous thing, but making 3 characters on IK Plus wander around the screen was damn tricky because there wasn't enough colours to have the red, white and blue men. So to do it, I made the body colour of the jackets sprites and everything else was bit plot because it was black or pink. And the third one was done in character plot, bit plot into memory. That's the only way I could do it. And to actually use enough sprites, I had to have interrupts down the side of the screen, reusing all the sprites as well. And we were talking earlier about do programmers share tips and tricks? And I remember having that idea as to how to do it. And there's absolutely no way I could tell anyone because I had to prove it first and then get the game out. Otherwise, someone would copy it. And I had to just keep it quiet. And it was really difficult keeping IK Plus quiet for about 6 months. Really difficult.
Darrell, your best achievement?
When it came out, you had a certain number of sprites, but then all of a sudden we found that we could do some clever stuff, and you had these invisible bands down the screen where there was a set of sprites in each one. You had the challenge of making them cross from one to the other and playing all sorts of tricks to create something that it was never really designed to do. I think was really good. And then I guess also playing around with some of the other stuff like the tape loaders. I remember doing the little things where you've written a fast loader and then you've come up with like a little mini game. So because it took so long to load a game once you had the 64K, so you had a little like version of Space Invaders, or I think there was one in particular I did, which was a version of Centipede, which was like coming from doing the VIC-20 stuff, you got used to writing something in a ridiculously small amount of space, so you just put this little game up there first, and then people could play that while the main game was loading. Little challenges like that, I think, were probably the best achievement, and probably the biggest challenge, I think, is at one stage when one of the companies I was working for, they would typically try and release it on both the 64 and the VIC-20. So you'd go balls out and create this fantastic thing on the 64, and then think how the hell are you going to get it into 3.5K and try and achieve the same thing. And that was a real good fun challenge. And invariably you could achieve it. It's not quite the same, but those sort of things were pretty good.
And Ollie, what would you say were your best Zap covers and illustrations?
Well, there are quite a lot. I mean, well, not invariably, not all as good as each other, but I always liked Forbidden Forest too, strangely. But that it's partly because of the idea that came from Julian and Gary. They wanted to concentrate on this worm eating the hero, and they said make it really ugh. And I enjoyed doing that sort of thing.
That was actually the first issue of Zap I ever saw. So
right.
that left quite an impression on me.
Yeah.
Have you still got the original drawing?
That one's gone.
That one.
Well, quite a lot of them are sold, and a lot got lost because one didn't attach much importance to them, and
I mean,
either they were given away to staff members who professed
Chris
to like
Anderson famously got the leak cover of Zap issue 1 because lots of people said, "Where's that? Why haven't you got a scan of it?" And that's because never.
Which is actually the one I consider my worst.
Yeah.
For Zap. No, partly because Chris Anderson could never make up his mind what he wanted on the cover, and he left about 2 days to do the cover of the launch issue, because he kept going to and fro as to which game would actually be best for number 1.
Back to the money payment thing again.
No, actually that didn't come into it at all, to be honest. Probably.
Oh, well, he was handling that one on his own.
The one thing, there was often pressure from either programmers or the companies who were involved with the editorial. Usually because they wanted a game previewed on the cover, if they felt it was going to be a really good game. And if you preview a game before it's actually reviewed, it's less dangerous in the sense if then in the next issue you turn out and say the dud, it didn't matter so much.
Well, there's the famous issue of Katakis, wasn't there, which was on the cover, and there was nothing we could do about it. But the game didn't happen, and we had to. I've forgotten which cover we swapped. But it literally always the last day, or we had to repaint something different.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yes, that was a lawsuit.
Yeah, the game got
from
pulled,
Activision,
but we had the cover. so
You have a backup cover.
we did, yes. I can't recall now
No, I
what we did, but yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare.
That was an
It's one of the
all-night.
risks you took if you were going to go editorially with a preview rather than something that was reviewed.
Well, because we worked weeks ahead, of course, and I think that was an all-nighter because I had to do something else.
And there's one of my favourite ones because of the error was the Apollo 18, which was being done in a rush before going on a holiday. And it's it's the big visor on the moon with the space, and you can see the golden pillar, and it's got Zap engraved on it. And somewhere high above Vietnam on the way to the Philippines, all of a sudden went, oh Christ, it's not mirrored. But no mobiles, no cell phones, no way of getting back to base and saying, for God's sake, let's turn this plane around.
You couldn't do it easily in those days.
Would you ever go back to the 64 to write something new, Ben?
I don't know. Not necessarily back to the 64. It was interesting. Recently, I was involved with, as you may know, the Bedrooms to Billions soundtrack, and so with Rob and Max Horser, and so for that, for at least one of the tracks for that, I thought I want to write it, even though it's film music and it's documentary music. I want to write it in the style of a Commodore 64 piece, so I got my head into the space that I would have been were I writing a piece of game music, as it were. So although the final piece on the soundtrack we did using Cubase and lots of nice synths and stuff, in my head it was a Commodore piece, and we actually did also a Commodore arrangement using a tracker, I have to shamefully admit, rather than actually properly doing it with machine code. But yeah, so it's nice to be able to switch into the feeling of doing it. I mean, if I was doing it today, if I was going to write a Commodore thing, I'd probably just use an emulator rather than actually try and spend an hour hunting through the shed to pull out an old Commodore. So yeah, I probably wouldn't wouldn't go back to the Commodore to write a thing, but it's a nice exercise taking my head back to the place where I was when I was writing in my early 20s and the kind of the stuff that I was into then musically, but also the whole thing about imposing limitations is always an interesting creative exercise. Saying I'm going to write this tune with only 3 voices, yes, and I'm going to try and cram as much as I can in there, but use these limitations, And so yes, it's a nice thing. It's a nice thing to do as a mental exercise. Yeah.
And what sort of music was influencing your compositions back in the 80s?
Where do you get your inspiration from? Well, obviously, I mean, we were listening to a lot of like Jean-Michel Jarre and Yellow Magic Orchestra and sort of the classic kind of late 70s, early 80s pioneers of electronic music. But that sort of influenced the sound. But from a musical point of view, I grew up with a lot of like orchestral music, classical music, and I played in orchestras and stuff, and folk and jazz and things. So the music I was in my head, I was always writing for different things. I'd write for a rock band for one piece, and I'd write for an orchestra another piece. But then the actualisation of it would then obviously be influenced by kind of the sort of the big synth boys of the time, as it were, But for the musical point of view, yes, it's every single piece of music I've ever heard since I was born is kind of influences what I write.
Darrell, would you ever go back?
I've been out for a long time now, but it'll be a challenge. Possibly, yeah. I think it'd be good fun because I see a lot of games today, and I think a lot of the current stuff. There are so many platforms around now, and then people are spot now because they have you've got gigabytes of space and God knows how much complexity and the sound and the graphics. And I think actually the games back then, I still prefer to some respect because the people spent so much time making them playable. So they spent a lot more time. You didn't have the time to waste creating all the graphics, and invariably now they'll have a whole team doing the graphics, a whole team doing the music, and actually the core code for the game is relatively small. Bar a few, there are some goods out there, but there are a lot that turn out to be, I think, a bit more reaction testers. So I think, given the limitations, people used to spend a lot of time on the playability and making sure, it was almost like the first bits of artificial intelligence. It was learning and it was competing against you. So the challenge of doing it, I think, I haven't programmed it for a while. I've kept my hand in knowing how to program, but obviously through the years changed jobs and not done any. But it'd be a challenge to get my head around it again. I'd probably have to dig out the manuals, as you said, and get up to speed on 658 or where all the registers and all the stuff is there again. But I don't know, it'd probably be a challenge. It'd probably be an interesting challenge.
Have you ever thought about going back to the 64 Archer?
Well, believe it or not, I've still got one that works. Not full of Coca-Cola. Get that one in there. And the disk drive still works as well. But it still turns on and says ready with a flashing cursor. So for simple basic stuff, showing my son who's only 8.
Archer is great.
Well, no, it wouldn't be that. The last bit of basic I wrote on it, which this will be weird, I found something on the net that was 10 lines of code, always 10 lines of code for basic, and it generates a fractal pattern. So it took forever, but it generated a blocky fractal, Mandelbrot set right in the middle of the 64 screen. I mean, how weird is that? But the 652 I've got a lot of affection for. The last time I nearly programmed it again was something to do with arcade games, where a friend of mine in America was prepared to fund a project on doing Atari Tempest new levels. And I was really up for actually, doing something with the original hardware. Of course, the simple thing is to do it with MAME. But no, I really fancied the idea of actually doing it with a real chip. So, yeah.
Max Hall still does. Max still does loads of his music using original hardware. His studio is just. It's like all of this, but just crammed into a closet, basically. But so loads of times, loads of recordings he does. He hates using emulators and stuff, and it's always turned on all the original hardware.
Yeah, you talked about Jean-Michel Jarre just now. On the way here today, I was listening to Jean-Michel Jarre. Okay. I'm obviously stuck in the 70s. But I had Oxygen and Chronology on the way over here today. So, timeless bits of music.
Okay, I'd like to throw it open to the audience now. Has anyone got any questions? You put your hand up and I'll bring the mic to you.
Oh, come on. There's got to be one.
Surely there's something.
Now we've said everything that could possibly be said now. That's it. There's nothing more to say. We've done the definitive panel. Let's go home, boys.
What? Pub's still open?
Should we need the mic?
Quick random question. Besides the games you was making, are you actually playing the games? I think I'm on a 64. So would you actually play any other games besides the ones you was making? If so, which ones did you like?
Who's going to go first with that one?
I played a few. My favourite game ever was, I did my favourite. Certainly the game I spent the most time on was, and I don't know if anybody remembers this, is Masters of the Lamps. A game called Masters of the Lamps, and it basically, the reason I played it over and over again was it consisted of two levels. There was you're on a flying carpet, kind of flying through space. There's these coloured rings coming towards, like your standard kind of following the track through space. So that was the first half, but then the next level and subsequently harder levels was this genie blowing bubbles out of a bong. And you had to kind of select the right, so he'd blow kind of a red bubble, and then you had to go and hit the red vase, and then a red and a blue, and you had to hit red and blue.
It was gongs. It was actually a gong, a little gong.
Yeah, that's right. It was the gongs. Yes. Very good. Yes. But so the first kind of set of levels was like was the colour and a note. And then the second set of levels was just the colours. But then the third set of levels was just the notes. And I could do just the notes, you see, because they're very few. I could remember sequences of 15 notes or whatever, yeah. So I spent ages and ages playing this game just so I could get to the final notes level and then blast every other bugger out of existence with it because I could do it and they couldn't, you know. But yeah, so Master of the Lamp's a great game. With an American game, I can't remember who did the music, but it was all kind of Russell
Lieblich.
Russell, yes. It was all rock and roll.
He was actually a professional musician before he got into composing for Activision.
There we go. You know more about him than I do. And what's his phone number?
Unfortunately, Russell is no longer with us.
Oh, really? Oh dear.
He died about 10 years ago.
Right. Oh, see, yes. As I said, I enjoy that. Yes. So yeah, I play quite a lot, actually. Yeah.
Archer, any particular favourites from you?
Well, it might sound sacrilege, but I very rarely ever played anyone else's games. I used to have this weird argument saying I'm an artist and I don't want to dilute my creativity and all that crap. But no, to be honest, I did play some and get really addicted to them. I'm thinking of Andrew Braybook's games, Paradroid, Iridium, Grizzly's Day Out.
Iridium was good.
Yeah, mainly because me and Andrew got on quite well, and every now and again he'd send me a tape and it would turn up out of nowhere. And he'd say, what are you doing to this? And I played Paradroid and I got absolutely hooked on it. I mean, as in 48 hours went by and I sort of realised it was Monday morning all of a sudden. Yeah, so yeah, I did that. What else? Some of Jeff Minter's stuff. We were talking earlier, me and Darrell, about the, I can't remember which game it was, the one where you sat on a camel, it's always a camel, and the head is in front of you with his ears going back and forth.
Activation of Iridia Space from Battlex.
Battlex, that's it. And I just remember sitting on this camel laughing at these ears going back and forth.
He knows his stuff, doesn't he, Fisher?
Roger, any particular games you remember?
That's it. I'm also heretic. No, I didn't. I played quite a bit of Spectrum early on, but I never played anything with Commodore because we had a fairly professional team. They're getting on with it. My closest was, on the whole, acting as Bridget Van Ruben, the art critic. Of dealing there, I actually had to learn how to load a Commodore with still images that people would send in on tape, and then sort of come up with wonderful pseudo-artistic deliberations on the quality of the art. But I never actually myself played a Commodore game. I'm afraid I picked up with the PlayStation, the Mega Drive. Sorry, actually, Mega Drive.
Darrell, any games you got addicted to?
The Iridium obviously was one that, and the Jeff Minter stuff, they all stand out. There was another one he did, and I can't remember, was it Matrix? Did he do something called Matrix? I remember he had one that was, Good Runner, it might be, where you had, you were going up the side of the screen along the bottom, it used to be really addictive.
Oh, that was Laser Zone, where you got the two lasers shooting in.
I can't remember, I forget the title of it now, it was one of Jeff's ones, and yeah, he used to quite like that. But also the programmers I worked with, when we, at one stage we had a house in Hawley, which was where all the programmers worked. And actually used to be quite good playing all the other guys' games, so you were sort of acting as a bit of a tester as well, and some of them became a bit addictive because, you know, if you got through a level they were like, oh damn, I can't release this, so they'd like add a bit of code, make it a bit harder, and then you'd subsequently 10 minutes later you've done it again. And it sort of helped them develop as well, so that was pretty good.
Did you become too good at your own game? When you played it a lot, did you know what was going to happen?
I always tried to, if I could get through my own games easily, I always went back and like, right, I've got to make this a little bit more intelligent, a little bit faster, a little bit trickier. So I always like to think it was doable, but go to someone value for money, I guess. You don't want any, I mean, the last thing you want is to sell a game and then someone's, you know, they got through all 99 levels in like 2 hours. You really want to make it a challenge. And I think those games did shine back in the 80s. Some of them really were. You could keep going back and you were like, yeah, it took you a week or so to master a method of doing it. I think the other fun thing was all of us used to put some back door in somewhere. There was always something, and it was trying to find what they'd programmed in, whether you're holding down joystick button 1 while pressing 4 keys and tapping something else, all of a sudden you've got like an extra mode for one. Those sort of things were quite
like the mysterious lunar lander in Jet.
Yeah. So yeah, quite a few, I think.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah. Has anybody actually found all of the backdoors that Archer put into his games? Choose any of them. Go for IK Plus.
Or the 16-bit.
Your choice.
The 16-bit one had about 50 things in it. So yeah. What amazed me though is someone in Edge magazine years ago, before it got a bit techie and up its own arse, they had hacked the game or found somewhere off the net, I don't know what, a whole list of all of them, but they still didn't have all of them. There was a couple maybe they couldn't print because they're slightly dodgy. But yeah, the IK Plus on the 64, there wasn't a lot in it, mainly because I ran out of RAM. I think I had about 12 bytes left at the end of that. That was, as you were saying earlier, that was tight, really tight. But Drop Zone didn't have a lot in it, other than my initials buried in the landscape for copyright reasons. But not many people have ever spotted that. Yeah, it is a bit late, yeah.
I'd like to say thank you very much to the panel and hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back at 3 o'clock with the Amiga panel.
Great.
Lunch down the pub then.